Greg. You're in New York first, though. Greg, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, what's on your mind, Greg?
I called in yesterday and I found myself talking about decentralizing social networking because of Bitcoin. So I just thought this is a topic I really enjoy talking about, and it has to deal with liberty. So kind of wanted to bring it up on the air.
Okay, what is it?
Well, basically, I look at sort of technology as a big enabler of decentralizing things that previously we needed to centralize.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see this all over the place. You could see it. There's this guy, Clay Shirky, who talks about it a lot. You can see it, for example, in journalism. It used to be that you would have a journalist privilege, you would have the press badge, and these days anyone with a blog can be considered a part of the citizen media.
They should be,
and
at least,
so journalism,
yes.
Yeah, you could start your own radio show, for example, or anything else. And so that kind of blurs the lines and the protections that journalists, had in the past. Now, who do they apply to? They should apply to everyone. And that's kind of interesting because entire sort of industries are being disrupted. You could see this with Uber disrupting the taxi industry, for example, or Airbnb disrupting the hotel industry.
Right.
And so you can basically see the progress of technology kind of disrupting what we've put in place before this technology existed, which was much more centralized. And so entrenched players are definitely, they're looking at ways to protect their turf for now,
Sure.
But that's not going to last forever. So that I find that to be really interesting. And I think in general, what you guys talk about governments and sort of having liberty is in a way decentralizing what we couldn't decentralize before. I think the internet would decentralize government as well in the next 30, 40 years, hopefully. So that's sort of my thesis there.
How can you see any areas that the internet might further decentralize things? I mean, I guess I wouldn't have guessed this Airbnb thing, and I wouldn't have guessed this Uber thing. These are, they surprised me, I guess. So, obviously, I think it's going to disrupt everything. I just don't know what that looks like. Any ideas?
Oh, well, for sure. I mean, this is a huge topic, but just to give you like the shiny examples, look at, for example, hurricane, any hurricane, any disaster that happens. A community often has to wait for the city or for federal funds or some organizations to come in and start rebuilding. But do they really have to wait? So, right now, there are these centralized services on the internet. For example, Facebook, Google, and so forth. But if you live in a small community, if you live in an African village, for example, there's absolutely no reason why you can't just use your local network. Why do you have to go use Facebook servers? And if you can't reach them, then you can't communicate. So a lot of these things will start getting decentralized, not only social networking, but power generation. There won't be centralized power grids necessarily. But
that would be awesome when that happens. I remember reading something about like a nuclear generator that Honda was developing in Japan.
I think it was Mitsubishi, wasn't it?
I don't know, one of those companies. And it was like a really small nuclear generator that you could put out kind of by your air conditioner outside of the house.
It wasn't a thermonuclear. It was depleted uranium nuclear, meltdown proof.
There's no moving parts or anything like that, from what I understand, and it just sits there and generates power. So that was really exciting because I love the idea of decentralizing the power grid. The ancient power grid that many areas of this country have is a major contributor, certainly in the Northeast here, where it gets darn cold for some parts of the year. People die, when the power goes out for long enough. And
don't worry, down in where it's hot, people die when the air conditioners go out too.
That's true. Yeah. So this is pretty serious. And of course, when the government's in charge, when they allow for a monopoly on power providing, when they protect that old business, that means that we're all stuck in 1970 as far as the power grid is concerned here. And that's a terrible thing. That puts people's lives in jeopardy. Not to mention it's incredibly inefficient to have to shoot all that power across those lines. That's, there's transmission costs involved in that. If you could shorten the distance, then it would be more efficient.
Exactly. I kind of see government as like a special case of this bigger problem of centralization. I think before the technology exists, government is an emerging phenomenon, and countries are an emerging phenomenon. But once you have, you get to a point where a neighborhood will be able to install sort of a government program like an open source WordPress, for a blog. You would just install. You would set, it would have some settings. It would vote for what the tax rate would be with the social services they want. But in general, it could just run the place. And there's not a lot that, you could fill out forms online. There's no reason to stand in line. So I think a lot of it is going towards that. But there's still, I think, a decade or two away.
Well, that's because the government doesn't really jump onto tech trends in any meaningful way. I mean, right now, if I want to send a motion to the court, I've got to go down there physically or stick it in the mail. Even though they have fax machines, us regulars aren't allowed to use the fax machine. And, of course, if we were, we'd still be talking about 1980s level technology. So, you can't submit by email. Right. They have email, but you can't use it because the rules are written for 1910. Or something ridiculous.
Actually, I think one of the most backwards laws, one of the most anti-economic freedom laws in New York State, where I'm from, is there's publication requirement that if you form a certain type of company, which is an LLC, other types don't require this, but if you form an LLC in New York, you have to publish it in 2 newspapers. Newspapers.
Right.
They're getting harder to find.
Well, or if you create a fictitious name and a variety of go bankrupt and a variety of other things, you have to publish it in a newspaper. I mean,
that's crazy.
Why not chisel it out on a stone tablet and lay it out in the sound and have somebody read it out in town square? I mean, it makes no sense.
There was a news story. Actually, there was a story a few years ago about I think was the Eagle Times, the Claremont, New Hampshire newspaper was going out of business. And apparently the government authorized some sort of I don't know if you want to call it a bailout. I think it was technically a loan. I'm not real clear on exactly how that worked. But their excuse for getting involved in this was that, well, we have to have a newspaper. That's our agency of record. There's these laws that require certain things be published in a newspaper. So the government guys used that as their excuse to bail out this newspaper from failing. Oh my God, what would we do? We wouldn't be able to follow our statutes. We need to save this newspaper.
What would be the agency of record in absence of this newspaper?
Yeah,
they don't even know.
Crazy.
They don't even know how to talk about it.
Greg, thanks for the call tonight, man. I appreciate it. Like the ideas, decentralization is a good thing. And yeah, I think it's certainly true. We're going to see more of it.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.